Hey guys, welcome to another episode of R-Rated Christianity. Your eyes are not deceiving you. We have actually started on time for once in months, but there's always a first. So all the technical difficulties of last week, sorry about that. We have these new ear things, and Jeff's trying to get us up to modern times, and there was a couple of hiccups or whatever, and at least me, George doesn't resist as much as I do, but so that's probably on us. But thank you for being here. This is R-Rated Christianity. It's an apologetics podcast. It comes from the Greek word apologia, to give an answer, a defense for why we believe Christianity is logically consistent, doesn't violate the law of non-contradiction. We believe the Bible is authoritative, all 66 books. So our job is to understand it. We believe God is real. He's the architect of everything, the author of life, time, space, and matter. And we believe that Jesus Christ is the second person of the Trinity, of the Godhead, that came into our shitstorm, so to speak, and showed us how to live a life that we couldn't live, and offer us a gift that we don't deserve. That's right. And so that's the gospel. That's the good news. But if there's good news, there's bad news, and we got to talk about both. So we talk about good news, bad news. We talk about what the problem is and who the answer is. And we're going to talk about that again tonight. So R stands for real, raw, and redemptive. We have real conversations about real topics. Yes, we do it in a raw way, but hopefully all of this genuineness and hopefully a deep dive into God's word and an exercise in critical thinking leads people to the third part of the R, which is a redemptive relationship with that first century Jew we call Jesus. That wasn't his name, that's the translation, Yeshua, but we believe he's God. He's Messiah. Excuse me. And so we talk about topics that they talk about in church. We talk about topics they don't talk about in church. We kind of a biblical worldview, if you're a follower of Jesus Christ, a biblical worldview should be your glasses, should be the lens that you look at everything. And that's it's going to affect all three areas of your life. We think there's three areas of authority. There's your family authority, and who's the authority in the family. There's a church authority, and then there's government authority. We're going to talk about those tonight, the church, government authority, and this label that people are trying to put on Christians these days, where they call you a Christian nationalist. Dun, dun, dun. And what that means, and what that means, and what it truly means, and how it's being used, and what do you do about it, if there is anything to do about it. And so Jeff's here. We got my buddy Joe here, my brother in Christ Joe, and we got George here. Tyler is off tonight. But we're going to talk about Christian nationalism, whatever that is. That's the term that's relatively new. It hasn't been around for a long time. I mean, you would hear it sparingly before more recent times. And people ask, are you a Christian nationalist? You hear that, and church leaders are asked if they're Christian nationalists. And I think it's wise if you ask yourself, what do you mean by that? Because definitions matter. And so people say, I'm a Christian. What does that mean to you? Because some people's definition of Christian is all jacked up. So when you hear the word Christian nationalist, you have to think to yourself, okay, what does that person mean by that? What's the definition of that? That matters, because if you say I'm a Christian nationalist, I believe in nationalism and I'm a Christian, so I don't know what that means. But today, George, and we can just dive into this, today it's used more as a slight. It's used to control you and shut your ass up. I mean, if you stand for traditional marriage, if you stand for two genders, if you stand for pro-life positions and you don't support abortion, if you stand for anything that can be rooted in a biblical, then they want to call you a Christian nationalist to shut you up. And then the trifecta of attacks is to call you a white Christian nationalist, right? That really kick you in the nuts. And that's supposed to really shut people up. And so that it's used as a weapon. It's not a compliment, at least the way it's used today. But I think we should dissect it, where it came from, George, and break it up, and what are potential responses, and what do they mean when they call it that, and why is it being used today? Because we want to label, because let me tell you what you don't hear, George, and I'm kind of giving you a lot to kind of set up in here. What you don't hear is you're a LGBT nationalist. You're a transgender nationalist. We don't hear shit like that. You're an Islamic nationalist, because all you got to do is go to Dearborn, Michigan, and you're going to see that. Hey, there's Tyler. I guess he is here. That's Joe. And so you don't hear these labels. People don't get labeled those things. But yet Christian nationalist is something that we got to make sure that we use and to control people. And so, I mean, I frankly just I frankly just call bullshit on that. I just do. Because you don't hear that term with anybody else that's trying to say, because what they're saying is, you're trying to take your worldview, Christian George, and you're trying to nationalize it to the nation. So you're a Christian nationalist, which means you got a lot of problems. You're misogynist, you're homophobic, you're Islamophobic, you're transphobic, you're all these other things. And so it's really used to shut you up. And again, and we have to call BS on that, because no other worldview, starting with the LGBT or trans or anything else, or Islamic, no one else is labeled that nationalist when they're trying to, or an atheist nationalist, when they're trying to implement their worldview on society, which seems like everybody else is winning but the Christian these days. So a lot to consider. I'm sorry that I just did a thought dump on you, but I think I wanted to encapsulate how this term and this ideology is being used as a weapon today.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good setup to the discussion. I really do, because it's hard to define. But what we do know is that it's being used as a pejorative. It's definitely being used as a smear, and we've seen a spike in the use of the term Christian nationalist, or the label, which is always meant to demean people. It's always meant to put people in the box and shut them up. I can't stand labels. I know you say that a lot, but I can't stand them because they dehumanize people. They trivialize people. And they're meant to shut people up, to basically stifle debate. And that's what this is. A Christian nationalist has become nothing but a smear and a label. But I've seen it spike in the aftermath of the Trump election. I really have. So basically, because Trump had a surge, a surprising surge, people thought, Trump has a checkered path morally.
Right.
Who doesn't? But Trump
he had a little extra.
Okay. But Trump had, so did the Apostle Paul and King David.
And Peter and everybody else.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's like, where do you start and where do you end?
Yeah.
So pretty soon you find, oh my goodness, I think I'm on that list. Yeah. But what happened was, really in the aftermath of Trump, they started using the term Christian nationalist. And it seems to me that it's being used as a way to negatively describe any conservative Christian that believes that it is our duty as a conservative Christian, or as a Christian. I mean,
just say Christian, right?
Christian.
Yeah.
I was thinking in political terms, as they define it, because that the definition of Christian is rather varied today. Unfortunately, they're throwing everything in the Christian sink inside Christianity when it's convenient to them. That's why I think when we talk in political discussions, it's useful to use conservative Christian versus a progressive Christian. But as a biblical Christian, as a biblically minded Christian, I am compelled to defend the faith in the public square and to explain.
To give an apologia.
Yeah.
To give a defense.
A rational, right. As we say, a defense of the gospel that is objectively true, rationally compelling, and subjectively engaging. And I'm stealing that definition from Dr. Douglas Gruthis, who wrote probably, I think, the best Christian apologetics book out there, second to none. And it's simply called Christian Apologetics, and it's Douglas Gruthis. It's kind of a weird last name, but it's Groothuis. But that's how he describes it. Can you defend the Christian faith in a way that's objectively true? Can you say, here's what the Bible says, and here's what we see out there, this mind-independent reality, and is there a handshake between the two? Or are we in Avengers land, right? Are we talking La La Land here? The Christian faith is objectively true. Can you show that it is? Right? Can you talk in scientific terms if necessary, in basic historical terms, in basic theological terms, in terms of design? I know you're very good and you enjoy making practical arguments for Christianity. Right. Can you do that? So is it objectively true? We would say yes. Can you do it in a way that's rationally compelling? It's not discombobulated. It's not incoherent, but it's logical. As you say, logically consistent. And is it subjectively engaging? Can you show that it matters to people? Brother Joe's here tonight. And one of the things that I heard when you shared your testimony about your conversations with Joe before you walk with the Lord, Joe, is that, and you just said it 20 minutes ago. You said, well, because it just makes sense. It's a subjective state. It spoke to him. It subjectively engaged him. He looked at his experiences in life, looked at what Jesus was offering, and thought, oh my goodness, I'm filled with all kinds of gaps that Christ can fill and only he can fill. It's subjectively engaging. Mark David Hall says that's how he sees, my favorite scholar on the issue of American civil government and the founding. And that's his position that he takes. If you haven't bought every book that Mark David Hall has written, you should buy it because he makes these arguments very well. Shouldn't we be looking for a way to explain to people how Christianity is absolutely relevant and how it ties into everyday stuff, including civil government and politics? If you do, and you say answer to that question, you're living that out. You're a Christian nationalist. Well, at least to the legacy media and to left-wing
that's why I said when I opened up with my opening comments, is it depends who's asking, because that's going to give you the why they're asking, and it depends on what definition they're talking about.
That's right.
If you're saying that I believe in the national, I believe in nations, and I believe in our national sovereignty, and I happen to be a Christian, and then I combine that with Matthew 28:19, the Great Commission, going to all nations, including your own, making disciples of all men, teaching them to obey all that I've commanded. Well, then I'm trying to take my worldview that happens to be biblical, and I'm trying to persuade, not force. That's the difference between Christianity and Islam. It's the art of persuasion or the art of intimidation and force. And under Christianity, because God doesn't want robots, he doesn't want slaves, he wants children. You have to be persuaded. That's why in Revelations 3:15-20, he's knocking on the door, right? When John's telling us, he's not kicking it open. No. And he's waiting for you to open. No, he says, and if you open it, it's conditional. If you open the door, I'll come in and dine with you, which is a statement. I'm half Lebanese, half Mexican. In Middle Eastern cultures, that's very intimate because you're sharing food and you don't have utensils, and it's a very intimate statement. We'll be intimate. We'll be close. If you let me in, and we'll dine together. And so we're supposed to be trying to shape our nation with our worldview. I mean, the LGBT movement is doing that. The trans movement is doing that. Right. The Islamic, go to Dearborn, Michigan, and see if there are Islamic nationalists over there. Because remember, Islam, and we're not going to talk about in deep Islam today. We've done it in shows before, and we will in the future. I think it's more relevant now than in past times. But Islam is an imperialistic mindset. They're trying to set up one caliphate under one caliph. I mean, that's just the way it's supposed to be. It's a theocracy, right? Everything's Allah controls. Muhammad is the only prophet. The shahad. I mean, they're saying that they're making this profession that Jesus is a nice prophet, dude. Even though the Quran talks about him in higher regards than Muhammad, but he's not the final prophet. Allah is, and we're going to impose our ideas on you. So there's an Islam. Go to Yemen. Go to Saudi Arabia.
And I think it's fair to say though that there's a fringe on the Christian side that also wants the same thing in the United States. I want to be clear about that.
Tell me if this is the right description. And I heard this, and I wanted to ask you about it. The fringe you're talking about are the Christians that want to wrap the Bible in the flag. Instead of wrapping the flag or putting the flag in the Bible, it's the other way around. Yeah. They want to put the Bible wrap it as if there's their nationalism. The flag takes precedent almost, or at least equal footing with our scripture.
Yeah, I think that's right. I'm wondering if that's what causes it or if it's a consequence of it. In other words, where you start interpreting the Bible through your nationalistic principles,
right?
And that's deeply problematic.
Absolutely.
I was thinking about it in terms of something called integralism.
Say it again.
Integralism. So it's integral with ISM on the end. And that basically says that and I'm thinking specifically of Catholic integralism, but the same thing exists on the Protestant side. This is the idea. It's a fringe. They have no political power. There's maybe like 9 people. But there is a view that thinks that indeed that American public law and public policy should be completely integrated with Catholic doctrine. That's called Catholic integralism, and it's pretty radical.
Protestants believe that too.
There's a book out there by the guy Stephen Wolfe is his name, Wolfe, and he has a book called The Case for Christian Nationalism, and he basically takes the same position on the Protestant side. He's kind of arguing for what's called like a Protestant confessional state, where it gets real close to a theocracy. Now, our founders believed, and this is important. And see, this is where you gotta. It almost seems like you're splitting hairs, but these are actually significantly different. Our founders believed that not only should religion, specifically Christianity, play a critical and central role in the public square, but it should also play a role in government.
Yes.
Now, you could say that. You could say Christianity plays an important role in government without saying it should be a theocracy.
Right.
I mean, so
which is where the establishment clause is. That we're not going to establish a one religion, but so freedom of religion is different than freedom from religion. There's a difference.
Sure.
So you're entitled and you're free to believe and worship the way you want to, but But our founding fathers, and yes, we've done this many times on the show, but I wanted to let you finish your thought. I'm going to read some of these declarations that Congress, we have to, George, right? Every time. I think it's relevant.
Which one?
Well, 53 and 56, the two that, and you're going to add to one of them. There's another one that you added last time. I didn't write it down. Let me start with 53, 56, and then can you add to that, the one that you were going to?
I think you should go to 1852 and 53 because that was
I'll do that one
perhaps, first. We were at a fork in the road as a nation, and Congress weighed in, and they weighed in with a, with
double barrels, man.
But go ahead.
So let me tell you what we're talking about here. So there was a petition to Congress to remove Christian principles from governments, chaplains, from Congress, from the army, from the military. They really tried to push this. It was a bullshit concept of separation of church and state. We'll talk about where that came from a letter from President Jefferson in 1801 to the Dansbury Baptists. We'll get there in a second. But so all this was going on. And in 1853, in 52, and then in 53, they actually studied this. They went back to our founding. They went back to, we have letters, we have statements, we have speeches, we have meetings with our founding fathers and what they believed. And they came back, and I'm going to read a portion of it. You added to this last time, I think we were on Sidebar. They really dug in. So I'll read the part that I've always had in my notes. But they spent a year researching this. And they rejected the notion of this separation of church and state from,
Yeah.
And here's part of the statement. Had the founding fathers during the Revolution, listen to this. These are very specific words. Had the founding fathers during the Revolution, and these are in the minutes of Congress, by the way. Sorry, I'm going to say it again. This is in the minutes. This is not Nico, LaHood, or George Araujo, or anybody else's opinion. This is in the minutes. Had the founding fathers during the Revolution had a suspicion of any attempt to war against Christianity, that revolution would have been strangled in its cradle. Strong language. At the time of the adoption of the Constitution and the amendments, the universal sentiment was that Christianity, listen to this word, should be encouraged, not forced, should be encouraged, but not any one denomination. So they were just talking about Christianity. They weren't talking about all these other worldviews, and there was a split between the denominations. In this age, there is no substitute for Christianity. That was the religion of the founders of the Republic. And listen to this. And they expected it to remain the religion of their descendants, end quote.
Yeah. And
what do you do with that?
No, I mean, you reflect on it. Yeah. You reflect on it because it speaks a lot to the character of the country. By the way, that was an 1854 declaration. That's the 33rd Congress, first session, House Judiciary Committee. I wanted to go back to the 1852 and 53 declaration, and that's the 32nd Congress, second session, Senate Judiciary Committee, 1852 to 53. And there's some historical context that is, I think should be particularly appealing to you, and I'm sure it is, as a lawyer. And I'll get to that in just a moment. But here's the Senate Judiciary Committee from 1852. 53. I'm laughing because I can't believe how today I'd be like, they literally set the Capitol on fire. I mean, you think the Hamas protesters are bad?
Wait till we get to 1856.
Here's how it starts. Quote, "We are Christians, comma, not because the law demands it, not to gain exclusive benefits or to avoid legal disabilities, but from choice and education.
Yes.
And in a land thus universally Christian, what is to be expected? What desired? But that we shall pay a due regard to Christianity."
My.
That's the Senate Judiciary Committee from the 32nd Congress, second session in 1852 to 1853.
Well, let's fast forward, can we?
No, I want to get back to how you introduced this, that something was going on in the 1850s. Because from the time of the colonies, and I'm going back to, yes, even 1607 at Jamestown, but let's go to 1620 and 1621. What ultimately became sort of the seeds for the Massachusetts Bay Colony. From the very beginning of 1600s through the 1700s, all the way up to the mid 1800s, this wasn't controversial.
No.
It was generally understood that Christianity as a worldview
and the principles
shaped, molded our common law and every institution in the country. I mean, this wasn't radical. And then what happened was in the mid 1850s, you started seeing a surge, a push from certain elements of the citizenry that said, we don't like the fact that, that there's a place for religious activities in the government or by the government. And we sure sell don't want to see that happen in the public square. We'd like to see a complete secularization of the public square. And then Congress responded in 1852, in 53, in 1854, in 1856 with complete clarity.
But think about, to your point, and we've talked about this before, in 1859, something significant happened in society as well, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, Darwin's book, right?
That's right.
His book on evolution and natural selection and all that stuff.
I mean, it was going on in Britain, but all that stuff.
100%. But it's just interesting that this is all around the same time. It's whether you have this intelligent design versus natural selection through random mutation type of argument. How did we get here, and who's the author of
God's
this stuff?
getting bumped, and so you have this designer that's responsible for being essentially the first cause to everything and the author of all life. He's being replaced by this evolutionary theory, the theory of common descent or a universal common ancestor, that basically argues that everything that we see, from the universe to complex biological life, is the result of materialistic, unguided material processes.
Well, it's everything coming from nothing, and then one single cell organism developing
something called abiogenesis.
Yeah, well, I didn't know the word.
The spontaneous generation of molecules. Right. So not exactly scientific. Again, this stuff's really science fiction, but that is really, I hate to say it, kind of a driving.
Well, can I ask a question? About that? When you were saying it was wildly regarded as, or this wasn't a disputed thing. What about the existing inhabitants or the other people living in the United States at this point, like the Indian tribes? That weren't they here already? Like, were they on board with this new government happening?
No, there was a concentrated effort to reach out to indigenous people, to Indians. But
Thomas Jefferson did that.
But no, I'm talking within the founding
framework,
the founding colonists of the country, the founding fathers, the American citizenry.
Okay.
There's just no question. The overwhelming majority, to the tune of 98%, were Christians.
That's overwhelming.
Although there was a diverse
denomination
level of adherence to Christian principles, even among the founders. You had some individuals. Nico and I talk about this spectrum often. I think Mark David Hall does a really good job about talking about that as well. But he talks about how guys like Ethan Allen, for instance, were individuals who were all on board with Christian ethics, the ethical principles advanced by Christianity. We can see them in the Ten Commandments, in the Sermon on the Mount. It's a good idea to recognize that there's a creator. It's a good idea to love yourself and love your neighbor. So the principles of the Ten Commandments and the principles of the Sermon on the Mount. Ethan Allen was no religious guy. He was nowhere near an Orthodox Christian. He was a founding father, but he believed that there should be adherence, cultural adherence to those principles.
Right.
And he certainly supported the notion of embedding those principles inside common law. And he had John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, Ben Franklin. I would consider them probably religious rationalists. And then they just believed that, as you said, brother, Christianity makes a lot of sense. And they surveyed all the religions. They thought, which faith, which worldview do we think we should build this republic on? Which gives us the best shot for a culture not to be at each other's throats?
Self-governance, because remember, they wanted, this was an experiment. Remember, this was the first experiment attempt of self-governance. Everything else had been some type of kingship and domination. And so they said, no, there's going to be an experiment of the people, by the people, for the people. So as Alex, the Tocqueville, sorry, I couldn't think of his name for a second. Alexis de Tocqueville came here and said, there's two things about these Americans. Number one, they have a high moral compass, and number two, they're educated. I mean, that's how you can govern yourself, if you know how to treat your neighbor and you're not a dumbass.
Yeah, I mean, you have to think
democracy
in America was riddled with all kinds of negative overtones about that. But in that point, he wasn't saying, hey, France should be the same way. He was just saying there's something to this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, he was a Frenchman after all.
By the time he came over, we were only 50 years old. We weren't some long-established government.
And it's in the aftermath of the French Revolution, which ultimately led to atheism.
Right.
Whereas the opposite happened in the United States. But I think these are important discussions to have, to go back and say, what was going on in the country? What did the founders have in mind for the Republic? And what was the thinking in the culture? And what was the mode and the tempo of the culture the whole time? And there's something that happened in the 1850s. Nico's right. That there was all of a sudden there was this pushback, and then Congress responded in the most forceful of ways. And Tyler, what we actually saw was another century of case law. There's a century of
defending a biblical mindset.
The notion
100%.
that the nation in various legal cases defending the notion that the character of the nation as founded was decidedly, not ambiguously, but decidedly Christian. I mean, I can think of a few right now. The city of Charleston versus S.A. Benjamin in 1846. Neal versus Crew in 1852. Let's see. State versus Ames in 1854. Lindenmuller versus the People in 1861. You bring up the 1892 Declaration coming out of the court, right? I think that was the Church of the Holy Trinity versus the United States. There was a declaration that came out of that, talking about our character as a nation being Christian, right? Let's see. The state versus Chicago B and QR Company in 1912. How about Doremus versus the Board of Education in 1950? We've got 100 years of case law of this stuff, and I'm scratching the surface. There was no ambiguity. So this idea that we are a secular nation is just complete and utter bullshit. I mean, it's just not in the history.
That's right.
But because we don't read shit, in fact, that's the problem. We actually read too much shit. And we don't read the things we ought to be doing. We're clueless as farts in the wind. I'm sorry about the sermon. Go ahead.
No, it's okay.
We were warned about that in the Bible too. Right?
I wanted to round out this slew of 1850s statements that Congress was making. You talked about 52, 53, 53, 54, and now we're in 56.
Yeah,
it's like
56,
this trifecta
please.
of kicks in the secular ball, so to speak, to establish what our Congress, our elected representatives believed was the culture, the way we did things, the mindset, the ideology of the nation. So here's an 1856 U.S. Congress. It's in the minutes again.
Go ahead.
All this stuff is not our opinions. And I'm just going to get a portion of this quote, but it's such a significant portion because it gets even more detailed, like you said, George. I mean, it gets more and more dialed in. I'll just read it.
Go
the
ahead.
great, vital,
Yes.
and conservative element in our system, that is, the thing that holds our system together, is the belief of our people in the pure doctrines and the divine truths of the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Yeah, any questions about that?
I mean, I don't know where you go with that. Now, see, any one of these
That's January 23rd. People, in case you want to look it up, January 23rd, 1856. That's the 34th session of Congress. For 34th Congress, first session. And it's entered in the minutes. There's no ambiguity there. I mean, Journal of the House of Representatives.
And and we're reading just portions of these statements.
Sure we are.
I mean, and you have to think about this. So you have, again, we're just trying to give context to this whole bullshit notion of the cut down of saying you're a Christian nationalist and what's wrong with you and all this other stuff. We're not saying that we are. I've never claimed to be, nor should any Christian say, yeah, I am. Just ignorantly, just say, well, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by, because definitions matter.
Yes.
Right? So all of this culture and mindset leads up to what? To 1954 to 56, where Congress and this country says, you know, we're so tied into the notion of trusting in something other than ourselves, of a transcendent creator endowing us with these rights that we have that wasn't given to us by government, so government can't take it away from us. And we enshrined on our exchange of value, our coins, our money, in God we trust. It's not in Allah we trust.
No, it's
not Muhammad we trust. Not
And it could have been.
Hare Krishna, Buddha. It wasn't anything. I mean, it wasn't in Hollywood we trust or in government we trust. It's in God we trust. And it's not a small g God, and it's not you can fill in the blank God. It's the God of the Bible, Yahweh. I mean, that's just a fact. And the history. And look, you have to be an honest debater. I mean, just say, yes, that's the way it was. I don't want it that way anymore. Fair enough. You've done a great job changing it, and our stupid asses have allowed it to happen. So fine, but that doesn't change history. You don't get to rewrite history. I know that's kind of the MO these days. When someone doesn't like something, we just want to rewrite it. Just say it what it is. Yeah. It is what it is, and it's not what it's not. So this, and we're just, to George, we're just scratching the surface here. This is undoubtedly the culture and the mindset of this nation, and our leaders believed in it. I'm not even reading John Jay's quote. the first Supreme Court justice.
Yeah, please.
I mean, I'll read it.
And John Jay, but go ahead, please.
Make your point if you want to.
I was going to go to the Johns, so to speak. There's a John Jay.
You gonna go to the bathroom?
No, it's okay. There's the second. He was the first United States Supreme Court justice.
This is a big one. So this is the first
Chief Justice.
Chief Justice of the United States.
Yes.
He drafted and signed the peace treaty, first Chief Justice. Now, he believed that Christian principles should be in courtrooms. John Jay actually suggested praying over jurors when they went back to deliberate. That was his suggestion.
Yes.
Let me give you his quote, part of his quote. Providence had given to our people the choice of their rulers, and it is the duty as well as the privilege and interest of our Christian nation to select and prefer Christians for their rulers, end quote. I mean, I didn't say that shit. That's not my words. That's John Jay, the first Supreme Court justice, the person who was closer, if not one of the people closest to the inception of this experiment. Now, you don't have to like it.
That's true.
You don't have to like it to know that this is what it is. This is history. This is our foundational ideology. And whether you like it or not, now it's changing. I get it. The other side is winning at this point, but that doesn't change the fact that this is what it is.
Yeah.
And
no.
we are,
go ahead, Tyler.
And
please.
we are in hot water now because the justice cannot. One of the justices today can't decide and define what a male and female is, right? But
I know what a female is. She didn't say anything about
but that. Here we are in 2024, and Christian nationalism. We're looked at as Christian nationalists because we're trying to put our faith and religion on other people. But what is the answer? I mean, how do Christians get that level of I hate to say power back or influence back in the United States? Because this is ultimately God's experiment, right?
Well, I mean, it's given first of all, it's given an apologia, it's given a defense, it's being able to defend and persuade people that as Joe said, that Christianity just makes sense. And when you look at, and I've said this before, when you look at a society where Christian and biblical principles are violated within it, there's disorder. Thou shalt not murder. Don't steal my shit. Don't covet my spouse, or if you're married to your husband or your wife. Don't covet. Don't bear false witness against me. I mean, just go through the 10 Commandments and biblical ideology, and when they are violated, even if you're an atheist, you don't want someone spilling innocent blood. You don't want someone stealing your laptop because it's yours. You don't have this, hey, it's mine. No, it's not. Survival of the fittest. I can take it from you. Well, no, that's not right. Don't talk shit about me because you want my business or you want my spouse, you want my this. You don't covet. Don't desire something that you have no right to. That's what coveting is, right? It's different than jealousy. I mean, so we look at these biblical, dishonoring your mom and go to an atheist house. I go to the atheist friend of mine and I said, so you're telling me that if your kid comes in, and I'm just going to say it the way I said it, guys, so I'm going to warn you. I'm going to use a word that I don't normally use on the show, but I'm going to just heads up, cover your ears. If someone walks in and tells your wife, shut the fuck up, bitch, you aren't going to be offended by that? Were you going to just say like, oh, that's just Johnny expressing himself? Oh, Johnny's just releasing his emotions? Are you just going to, why is that wrong? Why is that wrong for Johnny to talk to your wife that way? Give me the principle. Because you're not going to give me a principle. You're going to say because you think it's wrong or disrespectful. Says who? Just like when I'm asked the question is, why is it wrong for your wife to cheat on you? Because it's wrong. Says who? So the atheist is okay. The secularist is okay with someone making up the rules as long as it's them. The Christian says, I don't make up the rules. If you're pissed off at my ideas, you look up. Don't look at me. Because then I'm not making up anything. I'm just trying to understand and conform and ultimately champion the ideas of heaven.
As they then try to justify the idea that any kind of human morality is the product of an accidental random process like human evolution. Right. So, I mean, this conversation is a loaded conversation and it can go in any direction. But Tyler asked a question which you've answered, but I want to stay on that. Mm-hmm. I mean, again, is the average Christian able to have a basic conversation with someone sitting across the table with a different view? Are you able to articulate what the Bible says about human nature, what the Bible says about the words of Jesus, what Jesus meant in so-called controversial passages? Do you know your own scripture? You live in a nation, you're a tax-paying citizen. I hope you are. That's changing too. But are you able to defend that nation? right? Because I always tell everybody, I think to some level is a nationalist. I mean, right now, as we speak.
Well, define that.
Well, I mean, nationalism at its highest level simply means that you have a loyalty and you have a commitment to the nation in which you dwell.
So now, go to a soccer game where Mexico is involved in. The Mexican flag is painted on faces, is scraped. The Irish people, when Conor McGregor used to fight in the States, the crowd was all Irish, and they're chanting. Go to UK and all the rugby games. I mean, yeah.
You want to see what nationalism looks like when it's a religion?
Yes,
that's way beyond nationalism. But just generally speaking, there's a devotion, a commitment to the basic principles of that nation. And so we all adhere, hopefully, to American laws. We benefit from and we benefit American institutions. We would all say that there's or believe in the supremacy of the Constitution of the United States. I realize those things are under attack right now. But generally speaking, that is the truth. Those are nationalistic sentiments.
Yes.
And if you go to France, or if you go to Ecuador, or if you go to Guatemala, or if you go to China, you're going to get essentially the same sentiments for that country. So there's nothing inherently wrong with nationalism. There really isn't. The problem here is they're trying to make abuses of nationalism stick to the Christian, as if the Christian is engaging in any kind of nationalistic abuse right now. And that's just utter bullshit, because it's just not true. And by abuses, I'm talking about like Hitler, for instance.
Right.
Adolf Hitler was an extreme nationalist. It was Deutschland über alles, literally. And of course, it was just riddled with racialism, which just made him absolutely despicable.
I just was going to ask y'all, just at least from the three Abrahamic religions, obviously you got Judaism, Islam, Christianity. The core thing, obviously, in Christianity is witnessing and trying to get people to join the faith. Obviously, Judaism doesn't really concern itself with that, and Islam wants to do it by force. And so they don't fear Christianity because we'll say we'll take our licks and we'll walk away. But Islam, they fear it because they know, hey, if I don't walk this tightrope with Islam, I might get my head cut off or something might happen to me. That's not going to happen with Christianity, so they don't respect it. Therefore, they don't want to follow its tenets.
How many Christian violent protests have you seen? None. I mean,
what I have seen, and unfortunately, I'm ashamed to say that ashamed a little strong, but I'm certainly embarrassed. The Christian denomination under which I became Christian was a Mennonite. So I grew up Mennonite.
Okay.
And they're pacifists. They're Anabaptists and they're pacifists. And it's one of the denominations that came out of
how do they justify pacifism?
Reformed theology. Well, again, it's a particular reading of Matthew chapter 5, of reading the Beatitudes.
The cheek?
Exactly. So it's really extreme nonviolence. And I happen to believe, and I grew up in that, and I was agnostic about it. I was a teenager. I didn't frankly give two shits. I was busy doing what teenagers do. But I remember being in discussions in high school about this and feeling really unsettled about it by these propositions coming from a teacher.
Of pacifism?
Mm-hmm. And I and a couple other individuals would occasionally, as the discussion came up, because I will say this, I mean, debate and discussion was I went to an excellent high school. It was a Mennonite high school. Christopher Dock, Mennonite high school. Still there and thriving. And strong emphasis on debate, Nico, which I know is near to you. I mean, you're a trial lawyer, for goodness sake.
Sure.
If you can't debate, you can't make a living.
Right. Okay. Right.
So, and this high school, we would have courses like United States in Today's World. That was it was taught by Bob Good man, no pun intended. And we would have these intense debates about American foreign policy, and invariably we would talk about American interventionism in foreign countries. Okay, yeah, the topic of pacifism came up, and you could just feel the tensions in the room, because the assumption is that everybody in there subscribed to this notion that under even the most violent of conditions that you may be faced, that the responsible Christ-like act is to literally do nothing but pray for the assailant.
As they're stabbing you and killing your kids?
And these are the scenarios that came
insane.
up. These are the scenarios we would throw out. And man, you could just sense the tension. Why am I bringing this up? I'm bringing it up because in terms of protests, about a week or two ago, I discovered that about 130 Mennonites were protesting on behalf of Hamas.
On behalf of them?
Yes. Making comments at the Capitol like, let Gaza live. Last time I checked, Gaza's not a person. Okay? Gaza is a region riddled with, populated with Gazans.
Yeah.
And Gazans are overwhelmingly pro-Hamas.
Yeah.
Overwhelmingly so.
In the 70
And we know what
percentile, right?
Hamas is. A band of vicious,
Disgusting, evil bastards.
fucking animals. And these are the individuals that these Mennonites, representing Mennonite, I think it was Mennonite Church USA, were marching on behalf of. Now they would deny that. Well, we don't want violence from anyone. But you're basically coming out against Israel's intervention in Gaza, which is decidedly and unambiguously a self-defense act to rout that area from this cancer. And for these individuals, in the name of Jesus Christ, to be protesting in a way that facilitates Hamas in any way is beyond disgusting. You want to talk about immoral. So this is what I've seen recently from a Christian denomination that's gone completely amok. I don't think they're the only ones. Unfortunately, there are a lot of Christians that are just completely confused. They don't know.
But they don't even know what they believe in
They
their
don't
own
know
faith.
what they believe, and they don't know much less how to apply that.
I mean, I guess full circle, when you think about full circle, the whole idea of a Christian nationalist, I mean, it's not a term that we can trace back from decades and decades and centuries. I mean, it's used to, it's a control issue, like you said, pejorative. It's used as a cut down. It's used to label, to hopefully shut somebody up, to marginalize them actually, just like, oh, you're just a Christian nationalist, and only because we're trying to influence the world and set the culture. Look, I think the Christian has two choices, and I can't remember where I heard this from, that we're called to set the culture, not reflect the culture, right? Do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, Romans 12:2. If you're friends with the world, you're at enmity with God, James 4:4. Now, friends with the world, we know is in 1 John, I think it is not 1 John 2. Is it 1 John 2? Yeah, 16. The lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh. Those different definitions of world. For God so loved the world versus being the friends of the world and enmity with God. And so we're called to influence. That's what the Christian's supposed to do. The Great Commission is to go out there and influence, persuade people to Christ in every sphere, the family sphere, the church sphere, and the government sphere. Now, the church for the Christian is here. The family and government fall underneath it. It's not the other way around, right?
But if you're resisting the world, you're resisting a mindset.
Yeah,
that is
absolutely, an ideology.
That's hostile to the Christian mindset.
That's right, 100%.
And we're the chief ambassadors. That's our job.
2 Corinthians 5, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so we're called to represent our home state, our home country in a foreign land. Yeah. But we're supposed to be going after hearts and minds. And if you go after hearts and minds, biblically, you're going to get them politically because it influences everything. There are those Christians, like you said, that fringe that thinks they're inextricably connected.
Yeah.
And versus saying, no, this one, our faith, influences politics, advocacy, right? Set of ideas advocated by a group of people to affect the lives of others. It's a good working definition. So, yeah, we're supposed to be political. That's what Matthew 28:19 says. Go out, teach, make students, influence them to do everything that I commanded them to do. That is political. That is advocacy. You're advocating a set of ideas from heaven, from Jesus. So now partisanship's a different story. But when someone, I think for me, if someone asks me, "Are you a Christian nationalist?" Number one, I would say, "What do you mean by that?"
Exactly.
Because it matters to me. I mean, that matters to me. I am a Christian, by the way, who believes that my faith should influence my nation. That's it. I'm not going to apologize for being pro-life.
Yeah, don't cower. Don't run into the high grass. Don't be afraid.
Just
ask them what they mean.
Yeah, and say, what do you mean by it? And then define what you mean by it. I'm a Christian that believes that my faith should influence everything, to include my nation, to include my politics, to include my family, to include my friends, to include people, strangers and people you don't know, and then they become your brother. I mean, this is what we're called to do. We're not called to keep our faith to ourselves, and we're not called to stay the same. And we're called to bring as many people as we can to the saving knowledge of Jesus Christ. That's what that is the good news. We're trying to bring good news to people, and it doesn't stop at your home. And for the world to say, "Hey, keep that shit in your church," that's not the way it works. Yeah. And the reason why we brought up those examples at the beginning of all these different declarations, because our culture in this country wasn't like that. The whole keep it to yourself, the whole closet Christianity, don't ask, don't tell. Now, how the irony of how everything's changed. At first, it was don't ask, don't tell about your personal life and your persuasion in the military. Now it's don't ask, don't tell if you're a Christian. And we whisper. And we're ashamed of Christ. And he wasn't ashamed of us. It pisses the shit out of me.
How far we've come.
In a short period of time.
It is. And speaking of which, the fourth Chief Justice of the United States, John Marshall, the papers of John Marshall, his memoirs, volume 12, page 278. I want to read this, what he wrote. Fourth Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court presided from 1801 to 1835. Quote, "Oh, wow. With us, Christianity and religion are identified. It would be strange indeed if with such a people our institutions did not presuppose Christianity and did not often refer to it and exhibit relations with it." Okay, you're right. You're right. It wasn't that long ago. What's he saying? Christianity has so profoundly shaped the country. It really has made what the country is today, historically speaking, and yes, philosophically speaking. I would just remind you guys, if you're listening in, and or to anyone you might share this with, the very first sentence, or I think consequential sentence of the Declaration of Independence is a theological statement. It really is. Right? Pull up the Declaration of Independence for a moment. We hold these truths to be self-evident. That all men are what? Created equal. Endowed by their
Creator
with certain
inalienable
unalienable rights, among which are
life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness.
And the pursuit of happiness. That is a theological statement.
Yeah, it is.
Who crafted that? A pastor? No. Thomas Jefferson's the author of that. There were 5 on a panel, but he's the author of that. Jefferson was no Orthodox Christian, but he recognized the value of that and he respected it deeply. Are you aware that Thomas Jefferson, come hell or high water, attended church services in the United States Capitol on horseback during times of inclement weather, come hell or high water? Now, why was he doing that? Do you know that the United States Capitol routinely throughout the 19th century was used for church services? Do you know that Article 1, Section 7 of the Constitution explicitly forbids any legislative activity on Sunday, which is in itself an implicit statement to honor the Christian Sabbath in the Constitution of the United States?
I think that's a great point. That it's not a suggestion. We are telling the world. We are declaring.
It's the Declaration.
Yep, that's correct. We're saying this is
Nico. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. That's what this. That's what they sold. What's that?
And I feel like we are being sold and gaslighted. That we're the problem, right? I mean, and it's on a massive scale too. I mean,
because we don't know. How do you defend something you don't know what you're defending? You can't defend a position you don't know. And that's why George has been advocating. We talk about systematic theology we don't know. I mean, George Washington, the first president of the United States, if you read his farewell address, it reads as a sermon.
It does.
I mean, he was very open about his faith. He said, "I have only been an instrument, if not for the hands of divine providence. It is impossible to rightly govern a nation without God and the Bible." George Washington, first president of the United States. John Adams, he was president twice over. The general principles on which the fathers achieved independence were the general principles of Christianity. I mean, we're all. I should have brought. I was in a rush because Joe came over and I meant to bring out my New England primer that you gave me. I mean, this is a book. It was required text reading in public schools until 1930. It started with the founding fathers. You learn the alphabet with biblical scripture. It discusses the 10 Commandments. This is in every public school throughout the nation. If you look at the book, I wish I brought it. It's in the house. But if you said A, Abraham, the first father of this, B, C, and then it had another biblical.
I have a copy from 1930. It wasn't. It was. I think it was an original. I spent a ton of money on it.
You did? You have one original?
From
Oh,
1930.
wow.
It doesn't
Damn.
go back to.
Why is that original?
How much is that worth?
I couldn't find. Moving right along.
You know?
I don't know, but Nico could probably have gotten cheaper than I did.
I'm sure.
He has a knack for doing that.
Probably got it on eBay.
Yeah, I have a knack for spending way too much damn money on that kind of stuff. But
But
I
every
think
kid was taught that.
Yes.
I mean, this was the culture. Now, you weren't forced.
That's
You
right.
better accept Christ as your Savior. Do you understand me, or else we're going to kick the shit out of you? No, it wasn't like that. But you were influenced by this. You were taught these principles because they saw the rational benefit. You said Christian rationalist. They saw the rational benefit of it. That, like our Congress said in 1853 and 54, they preferred that citizenry
Right.
would be Christian because this is
Correct.
a Christian nation.
Yes.
Now, obviously, a nation can't be regenerate. I mean, it's not can a nation be Christian? That's another debate that a lot of people have. But the principles and the ideology that permeate
Yes, that's right.
the culture and the civic government are Christian in idea and in principle.
That's-
And you have to sometimes push back against the people who argue, well, what about the Crusades? And they tried to force Christianity on governments
well,
and people and this, that, and the other. And the simple answer, I guess, is that they weren't operating under true Christianity because that's
Well,
not...
hold on. But you have to
Yeah.
take it back a step further. And George can correct me. He's our historian. But the Crusades was a response. It wasn't an initiation.
Sure, of
So
course.
you had an Islamic movement, jihad,
correct.
that they were taking over countries. They're pillaging. They're killing people. Finally, the Christians were like, hey, shit, these guys are going to be on our front door. We better go. Now, did they take things to an extreme? Did they overreact at times? Absolutely. I don't think we're justifying
I think
everything.
it's interesting that people, secular
It's war.
people, especially atheist secularists, they only point out the crusade aspect. They don't point out, you know...
Well, of course. Look, these are disingenuous debaters.
I want to point out, that's a whole other discussion. We really should
know.
talk
It's
a
about
can
that.
of worms.
This is probably the best book out there.
Hold on, we need the
What is
tight
it
shot.
called?
We
this
need the
topic.
tight
It's
shot
called
of George.
God's Battalions.
Hold for the camera.
It's called God's Battalions.
Lower your brightness.
And
a
this
little.
is just an absolutely wonderful. I think he's probably the best scholar at
God's
at
Battalions?
at Baylor University by Rodney Stark. No, Jeff, he's not related to Tony. Okay, Rodney Stark, God's Battalions. It says the case for the Crusades. You guys have got to read that, and it's rooted in something called facts. Okay, versus conjecture. He does a phenomenal job. Treats the subject very, very well and very ably. I have every one of his books. He's just phenomenal.
Of course you do.
But this one is just absolutely
What a
phenomenal.
shock.
God's Battalions by Rodney Stark. So what do we tell people then? Where do we go from here? I mean,
Well, know
how
what
do
you
we
believe-
how do we
no-
take this information and turn it
Well,
into
I mean, you have to play. I always
strategy.
You have to spar with these ideas in your mind. But when I go to trial, I'm already I envision the advocacy. I envision the cross examination. I envision the opening or the closing. I'm envisioning. You have to play it out in your mind. You have to debate yourself. Your old self should ask your new regenerate self questions that you had before, and how would you answer them? How did you get to where you're at? That's what I tell people to do. Know what you believe, be able to practice it, and start with friendly fire. Go with a friend and have a discussion and spar. It's called sparring. I mean, when I train to fight, you spar lightly with teammates to prepare for the real fight where you're trying to knock somebody out. And so spar a little bit, hit the heavy bag, spar back and forth, do some intellectual mitt work in your mind. Train up, but know what you believe and be able to articulate it and study. Look, I mean, people spend a shit ton of time studying Cowboys or studying football or basketball or whatever the hell else people like out there. And they know about all the Marvel comics. They know about the Star Wars, and they're dressing up in Han Solo shit.
Don't look at me.
Whatever. I'm just saying, where are you going to spend your time? That's all I can tell. I mean,
right.
the most valuable thing you have in this world is your time. Because you can make more money, you can't make more time. I tell the men at Bible study all the time, it will be different times in our study. I'll say, look, guys, we're 30 minutes into this study. We're 30 minutes closer to leaving this earth. Whoever's been watching this show, and yes, we started on time today,
Hallelujah.
8:30. We're 54 minutes closer to leaving this earth. Every single one of us.
Yeah.
We're 54 minutes closer to leaving this earth, and we've
That's
spent
the
this
sober
time.
truth.
It's the truth. I mean, and every second it's. And I'm not saying it's tomorrow. I don't know. And by the way, I want to take the time to wish my pop's not watching, but my pop's birthday.
Happy
birthday, Papa
birthday.
LaHood. 87 years old.
Oh, that's amazing.
87
Happy
years old.
birthday, Pop.
87 years old. Your pop's.
My pop's coming up.
Yeah,
my
he's
pop's
close.
coming up this Sunday.
He's 84.
He's going to turn 84.
He's 84. Yeah, he's 3 years behind my pop.
That's right.
But what a blessing. So happy birthday, Pop. I'm sure my mom's watching, or she'll tell him. But all that to say is, time is the most valuable commodity to me. I mean, we have eternity waiting for us, but on this side of heaven, we have very limited time, depending on what it is. Spend time. I mean, I'm not saying you can't enjoy those other things. I was just busting chops. But I mean, if you want to be able to defend this, if you're looking at the world and saying, this is a quicksand of shit coming around us, and we're sinking right in the middle of it. Well, what are you doing? Well, I'm just one person. But you're still one person. I mean, Martin Luther King was one person.
He was.
Name somebody else. Booker T. Anybody else that did great work was one person. You're still one person. And that one person can have a ripple effect. Christ was one person. Each disciple was one person. We can go through the prophets and all the other, and Billy Graham, whoever it is, you're still one person. Don't deny that issue and that effect. Because even though you're one person, not everybody's going to be Rocky, but you can be Mick. And Rocky couldn't have done what he did without Mick. Now, Mick never got into the glory and the lights and wasn't behind. He wasn't in the ring, but he was still critical. He was just as important. Rocky couldn't have done it without him. So you don't know who you're going to sow into. And start with your children, with your friends, with your coworkers. And you don't know if that's the person. Is that when I go speak somewhere, I'm thinking there's someone in that crowd. Is that the person God had me come for? And who knows what they're going to do? Whether this show, stays at small or big or ginormous, it doesn't matter. We're going to be faithful with what the Lord puts in front of us, and then let the Holy Spirit work it out from there, right?
Yeah, I was just thinking as you were talking, one of the few things that I remember as a teenager about the Reagan presidency. I lived through it, and I was practically asleep because, again, I was like every other teenager. I was distracted. But he had a plaque. I think he had a plaque on his desk that said, "Never." It's amazing what you can do when you're not concerned about who gets the credit.
It's true,
and it's absolutely true. It's not about that, is it? It's about, what do we say, brother? We said it's not about being famous. It's about being significant.
Significant. That's a good one. Yeah.
That's
it. It's not about being famous. It's being significant. And if you're significant, guess what? You're famous in heaven. The angels rejoice when you bring someone to Christ. They throw a party. That when I learned that years ago, and I started thinking to myself, every time someone gives their life to Christ, everyone bends their knee and submits to the truth of Jesus Christ and accepts his favor and believes in his heart, professes with their mouth that Christ is Lord and that he was raised from the grave, and that you submit to his lordship, heaven rejoices. So it's about being significant, but if you're significant, you're famous in heaven. I mean, I look at it that way, that the angels are cheering us on as we fish for men. That's the truth. And maybe that makes my jacked up mind, but that's the way my mind works as I went out to the mission fields many years ago.
So my jacked up mind tries to summarize everything we've said. So basically on Christian nationalism, don't run from the label. Try to find out what the hell it means first.
But very few people mean it to be good.
True.
So just be aware.
But turn it into a positive. Talk about Christianity and talk about nationalism. Use it as an opportunity to educate. Really. Don't run for the high grass, and cower.
Well, you define the terms.
Yeah, right.
That's why, I've shared the Georgia, and these guys have heard it enough.
But not based on your definition, based on what they
no,
actually
what I'm
mean.
well, I don't know if this is a new term. I mean, really, that's why it's so hard to define it.
You got to decouple them.
Oh,
What's Christianity?
Nationalist.
What's nationalism? So how do you mean that exactly?
Got it. I get you.
And yeah, you're probably right. It's probably going to be pejoratively, but then that opens a door for a discussion. I mean, where'd you get that?
I was in this college. I've spoken to a number of college classes, and she goes, "Are you a feminist?" And I don't know how that wasn't even part of the discussion. And I said, "What do you mean by feminist?" If you mean, and then I gave a biblical definition. And then I said, so if that's your about loving my wife and honoring her and serving her, sacrificing and dying for her and loving her the way Christ loved the church. And if somebody in my house has to be cold, it's me. If someone in my house has to be hungry, it's me. If someone in my house has to die, it's going to be me. And to honor my wife and to treat her. And I talked about Proverbs 31:10 and honoring a woman, and the woman of wisdom brings joy to her family, and she's honored in the gates because her husband is honored here. And I gave her that. I mean, I just spit out her. I go, so if you mean that's your definition, I'm a biblical feminist. Yes. She goes, okay, thank you, and sat down. So you define the terms. Don't let someone put you in a box, because they're putting you in a box because they want you to shut the hell up.
That's right.
That's what they're doing. That's all this labeling shit is for. Is to shut you up and put you in a corner. And that's just like for a while there, everybody was racist.
Exactly right.
Everybody's a racist. And I don't be a racist. Right. Instead of saying like, screw you, no, I'm not a racist.
Yeah, God forbid we actually have a real racist.
Yeah.
No one's going to believe any of it.
Absolutely.
That's the problem.
Well, we're right on an hour. We started on time.
I want to end with Jefferson.
And with Jefferson.
No nation has ever existed or been governed without religion, nor can be. The Christian religion is the best religion that has been given to man, and I, as chief magistrate of this nation, am bound to give it the sanction of my example.
My God, man, that's
Thomas
I've never heard
Jefferson.
that one.
Yeah.
You have to share that with me.
It's in a text. It's in a historical text. I think it's what in the world is this? It's James. Is it James Hunter on religion at the time of the American founding, and he quotes it in some letter exchanges from Jefferson, I believe. But again, this is everywhere.
It's everywhere.
Everywhere.
It's not even close.
And we should learn it and defend it.
That's right. All right, guys. Thanks for joining us, Jojo. Thanks for being here. Jeff, Tyler, thanks for showing up. You probably thought you were showing up on time, but we started on time today. No technical difficulties.
We're in the twilight zone right now.
We got our earphones up. I got this shit in my ears. My ears are killing me because you got these big
me
ass
too.
earplugs.
I love
They're
it.
killing me.
Me too.
All right, guys. God bless you guys. Happy birthday, Pop. And hopefully we'll see you guys next week. Have a blessed weekend.